Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, July 9th, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at this individual poll from Rasmussen Reports, a poll that President Trump often cites for his approval rating, given the fact that they typically overestimate his approval rating in comparison to other polls. If we take a look at the data now, they seem to agree with the rest of the data that Donald Trump is negatively approved of in this country with a -9. But if you take a look at all of the polls they've released in the past, I don't know, for some reason they don't necessarily include them in each list, but you will typically see Rasmussen reports show him, considerably ahead in polls compared to other approval polls. As you can see here, this one in May, it was -1 when all the others were at a low point of -6. Taking a look at Rasmussen reports, continuing on, let's go ahead and see here. So this one was -11. This was around April. So, typically they do overestimate President Trump's approval rating. He always cites this on his Twitter page. I believe they're the only one that have shown him with a pretty significant approval rating in the past. I know there was a time period where he was approved of around late March, or right around this time period where it was significantly narrowing up. Let's go ahead and see. I don't know where the more, I guess you could say, they have more data from Rasmussen reports. They typically release one pretty often, but I'm sure if you go on President Trump's Twitter, you can go ahead and see each individual instance, which he's retweeted the poll itself, and said that this one is one of the more accurate ones because they show his approval rating very high. I think the problem with Rasmussen reports, again, is they overestimate Republicans. And if you go ahead and take a look at the pollster ratings from FiveThirtyEight, they have a C+ poll. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm not using this poll because I think it's going to be accurate in the general election. I'm using it because President Trump does specifically use this poll for his own approval rating. So, looking at the grade from FiveThirtyEight, C+ is not good. Looking at the data that they've released in the past, they have a mean reverted bias of Republican plus 1.5%, which means they've pretty much overestimated Republicans in the past, which makes sense considering the fact that they do tend to swing away from the national average. Though they do sometimes show Donald Trump underwater, this is a double-digit lead for Joe Biden, something that we rarely ever see come out of a pollster such as Rasmussen reports. I typically do take a look at their data when we're talking about election polls around the Democratic primary season or 2018 poll season, and they typically always overestimate the Republican Party, whether it's Donald Trump's approval rating or a matchup against Joe Biden. But now we see Joe Biden with a 50-40 lead over him in a poll that typically should be performing well for Donald Trump. So I don't know if they have the PDF. I'm trying to go ahead and see. I guess maybe it's on Pulse, and then they release it. I know that okay, that's so weird. I'm not sure where exactly. Usually they have a PDF when I go ahead and click on it. Usually RCP will directly link me to it, but I guess they're sending me over here. But, there isn't really much to go ahead and discuss other than the fact that, not only is Joe Biden leading here, but it seems that all data now, concludes that Joe Biden has a very strong lead over Donald Trump. The reason why I made this video is because I saw this article out from FiveThirtyEight that talked about Biden's polling lead and how it's big and steady. We do need to talk about the difference between polling 4 months out and after, but that's something that could be used for another video, so we're going to talk about it then because that's completely different than what we're talking about. So Joe Biden's lead is pretty significant, and I will say the fact that we are seeing, not just C+ pollster ratings. I mean, this is a bad rating in my opinion for a pollster, but we see, A+ ratings for Monmouth University and ABC News and New York Times that have pretty much shown Joe Biden with a pretty significant lead. And when I say that, I mean it very literally. His lead over Donald Trump is nearly, at this point, 10% nationwide. If we look at some of the polls, I'm going to go ahead and filter this. You can do this. Love the FiveThirtyEight website for that. A- to, A+. So Monmouth University, Biden +12, A+ pollster. IBD, TIPP, Biden +8, AB pollster. Suffolk University, Biden +9, Biden +12. Marist College, Biden +8. CNBC, Biden +9. So as we continue on and you take a look at the A-, A, and A+ rated pollsters, they all agree that Joe Biden has a pretty significant lead over Donald Trump. So we actually can go ahead and take a look at C. Again, Rasmussen reports agrees with the rest of the bunch that Biden leads by 10%. I want to go ahead and see if they have any other previous data from Rasmussen reports. I don't know if I skipped over it. I don't think I did because I would have seen it, but I could be wrong. Let me see if you can search for a poll on this. I don't think you can. Oh, you can. Rasmussen. I guess they only have this one. Yeah. So, okay, that's interesting. A general election against Bernie Sanders, and they did a Michelle Obama one in 2019. I did not know that. So I guess they haven't released too much general election data, but they typically do the approval rating polls. But I guess the most recent data, at least May, comparing it to now July, shows an improvement for Joe Biden by 5%. Around the time, I guess you could say May 20th, if we take a look, May 20th leader, I guess that was pretty much around the overall average, a little bit under though. Again, they do typically underestimate Democrats and overestimate Republicans, but if you take a look at the data now, I guess they're overestimating Joe Biden by around 0.5%. But it is very interesting to see just Rasmussen reports come out with a poll that shows Joe Biden with a double-digit lead. Typically, we don't see that many polls, from, I guess you could say, typical, not necessarily right-leaning. They don't have the little R by their name. They're not insider polls for campaigns, but they typically do, again, overestimate Republicans, and that's what I usually expect from the poll coming out. I think it was pretty important to note, not that, but also a new poll came out today from public policy polling for Alaska, and I'm actually going to cover that in a separate video because we know how long we've been waiting for an Alaska poll. If you're on election Twitter, you can go ahead and see everything that happened to get that poll out. But they ended up doing it for free. But I just think it's interesting that Alaska finally has their own data for the House, Senate, President, and approval ratings, and they all have very interesting data. I did not know Lisa Murkowski was that disapproved of in her state. She may actually end up becoming the most disapproved of senator nationwide. But besides that, Joe Biden's lead doesn't just go and translate from the national average. It actually has a pretty significant lead in a number of other states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona. Arizona, I actually want to take a closer look at. Considering the fact that Donald Trump carried Arizona and it's been a solid Republican state, Joe Biden has had a pretty significant lead. It has narrowed up in just the past couple of, I guess you could say, weeks, just because of that Gravis marketing poll that showed Trump ahead by 4%. Typically, Trump did not lead in any poll except for a 1% lead back in June of 2020. So it's still 2020, so June. But since then, he's pretty much lost to Joe Biden, per se, if you take a look at all of the data. But now, that poll release with Trump +4, it narrowed up the margin, but Joe Biden still leads by 3.1%. In 2016, actually, the polls overestimated Donald Trump in Arizona by 0.5%. So if you adjust that based off these numbers, Joe Biden still wins Arizona, and actually by a larger margin, by 3.6% in this state. That's assuming that everything is just as incorrect as 2016. If we can go ahead and take a look at Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I actually want to take a look at because Wisconsin had Hillary Clinton ahead by 6 point. I have no idea who that was, but okay. I'm going to turn my volume down so you don't have to hear that again. But looking at Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton was ahead by 6.5% here. She had a pretty significant lead, and they got very complacent with where they were in the state, and they didn't visit it. Joe Biden is absolutely going to put a lot of money and a lot of effort into Wisconsin after what happened in 2016. Not only is he going to do that, and he is doing it right now, Joe Biden is trouncing Donald Trump by 8.1%. The polls swung by around 7% in 2016. So even if you do adjust it based off 2016, assuming the pollsters have not accounted for their mistakes in 2016, which they absolutely have, and saying a lot of those Democratic voters are no longer voting for the Democratic Party, a lot would have to be right for Donald Trump to win Wisconsin at this point. And even if everything is just as wrong as it was in 2016, Joe Biden would still win Wisconsin. He would still win Arizona. He would still win Michigan. He would still win Pennsylvania. And even if we do see a dramatic swing in the national popular vote, Nate Silver, again, he came out with that difference between the 4-month ahead polling data versus the actual results. He found an average of a 7-point swing nationwide. A 7-point swing nationwide still shows Joe Biden ahead by 2.5%. And theoretically, yes, Donald Trump could still win the election if Joe Biden wins the popular vote by 2.5%. But I promise you, if the data doesn't swing by 7%, Donald Trump is toast. He doesn't win the election. He won't win if Joe Biden has a 3 or higher point lead nationwide. Yes, there is that very weird scenario where if Joe Biden wins by 5% on the national average, national generic, not generic ballot, but just national popular vote, Donald Trump could still win the election, but a lot would have to work right for him in very specific states. And it looks like as the national lead grows for Joe Biden, his lead in the swing states grows. And even though Joe Biden is only leading by 10% now, I know it sounds really weird saying only leading by 10%. If this trend continues, Joe Biden could very well be above 10% by the time we hit Election Day. Now, I know things are definitely going to narrow up. We have to expect an October surprise. There's a lot of things that could go wrong for the Biden campaign, as they did for Hillary Clinton's campaign. But I will say at this point in time, not only is all data indicating, and I mean all data indicating that Joe Biden is going to win the presidency, but they're saying he's going to do it by a very substantial margin, which I think is pretty fascinating, taking a look at where this race was just back in March. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Please consider subscribing on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. We just reached 1,100 followers on the Instagram. Thank you guys so much for that. Please check out the video on your screen and then a playlist for my 2020 election predictions. Again, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you all later today.